All right, and we are live. Hello, everyone. I see comments already, so it looks like we are up and running and ready to go. So welcome, everyone. A couple of things before we get started. You'll see in the description, there is a link for StreamYard.com. StreamYard is some software that I use in conjunction with YouTube and with Facebook that just allows us to see your name when you do something in the comments. So as we get started, if you want to just click on that link and give StreamYard permission to post your name in the comments when you do comment on something, then we can see your name. Otherwise, it just comes up anonymous comment. So helps me to interact with you and others to interact with you a little bit better. So, all right. Well, we are going to get started here. I'm going to share my screen here with you, because we have a lot of material here today and it's a beautiful day outside. So I want to make sure that we get through all of it as much as we possibly can and as quickly as possible. All right. So here we are, Flipping the Choral Rehearsal, hosted by me, your fearless leader, Matt Walker. I am the founder of the Choir Director Corner, and I am here to serve you as choir directors, helping you tackle all of your biggest teaching challenges. And I know we're all facing a huge teaching challenge here in the fall, which is why I came up with this webinar to help folks as much as we can. So again, before we get started, if you haven't yet, in the description, go ahead and click on that StreamYard link so that we can see your name in the comments. Here's a general outline for today. We're hoping for a presentation around 45 minutes. I'm going to run through this, again, information fairly quickly so I can get through all of it. And then at the end, I'll have a little Q&A. So as we're going through this, if you want to post a question in the comments, you can. And then every so often I'll hop out of the presentation here and see if we've got any comments. I've also got quite a few questions at the end as part of this presentation. So it might turn out that you've got the same question. So, and again, if you do have questions, a couple of ways that you can reach me, Matt at thechoirdirectorcorner.com. That's my email address. Obviously on Facebook. The website is www.choirdirectorcorner.com. And then in conjunction with this webinar, there are 2 PDF documents. And so these are web links to those documents. So it's choirdirectorcorner.com/flipped cheat sheet. And this is not case sensitive. So if it's all lowercase, that's totally fine. So /flipped cheat sheet, and then also flipped assessments. So the cheat sheet is just sort of a planner that will take you through the webinar step by step. And then the flipped assessments, that is a set of assessments that I am giving to you as examples of assessments, worksheets that you might do in conjunction with a flipped rehearsal model. So just something extra to share with all of you. So quickly, a little backstory before we dive into this content. Again, my name is Matt Walker. I've been teaching for over 15 years. I've taught middle school, high school, and also private voice at the collegiate level. Past 10 years have been 9 through 12 music, and 7 of those years have been in a one-to-one environment with iPads. And I'm very passionate about teaching music literacy, teaching proper singing technique. My master's degree is actually in vocal performance, and so that's something that I'm really passionate about. And also utilizing individual assessment in the choral environment to support singers and also document progress and to inform future teaching for us as choir directors. This past spring, like many of you, I taught 100% virtually for over 2 months. Now, the setup in our program in our school, we had synchronous meetings via Zoom. So with each of my choirs, I would meet twice a week at a set time for 45 minutes. And so then that is where sort of the idea of the flipped rehearsal came sort of into, sort of my brainstorming sessions. Like, how can I take what I'm doing in person and sort of translate that over to virtual learning? As part of this webinar, I had over 250 questions, which is awesome. There were a lot to go through, but I was super excited to see all of them. And they ranged from everything from I'm ready to learn anything, which is a great mindset. That's that growth mindset, which is awesome to see, to what to teach since we can't rehearse for a performance. So some multiple comments like that. And so depending on your situation, you may have performances, you may not this year. And so, this webinar is going to give you techniques, whether it doesn't matter which boat you're in, you're going to find some things to help you in this webinar. Now, what this webinar isn't, let's just set this up here for just a second. I am not a medical doctor. This will not be a discussion on the spread or transmission of COVID-19 or how it is or isn't affected by singing. We're going to leave that to the medical professionals. And if you've been on social media at all the past 4 months, there are plenty of places where you can discuss this. So for the sake of time, that's not going to be what this is. What this also isn't going to be, we're not going to spend too much time speculating about what this fall is going to look like, because chances are for every one of us, it's going to look different. We're also not going to talk a whole lot about how logistically we will hold rehearsals in person. Oftentimes, these discussions are not as productive as what maybe other things we could be doing. And you're going to find in many situations, you're going to have little control over some of those rules and regulations, because your school district, your school is going to tell you this is how it's going to be. Now, I do think that we want to try and make sure you have a seat at that table when those decisions are being made. And so, whether that's talking with your school administration, talking with the administrations at your church choir, if you're a community choir with your board, having those discussions and making sure you're a part of those discussions. I think that's the most important thing. For the purposes of today's discussion, we're going to assume that singing will not be taking place in person. Okay. Now, if you do have singing in person with masks, that's going to be an added bonus, and that's awesome. Whether you do or whether you don't have any singing in person on the agenda in the fall, that's not for us to judge or really discuss, but there are going to be ideas and techniques in this webinar which will very much still be applicable to your situation. Okay. Now, what this webinar will be, it's all going to be about keeping your singers singing and ways that you can do that. I've had so many comments from people that have said, my students, they're not interested in these other projects because they just want to sing. And from my perspective, I want to do anything that I possibly can to keep them singing. So we're going to talk about some ways that we can do that. Teaching musical concepts through repertoire. Now, going back to that previous question that you saw, well, what am I going to do if we don't have a concert that we're preparing for? Well, I'm still teaching repertoire. Certainly, is there some flexibility? Is there some opportunity to teach some things that you maybe normally wouldn't do in your typical rehearsal period? Absolutely. But to me, the best thing that we can do is continue to use music, choral music, to teach musical concepts and to give our singers an engaging and more valuable experience. You can still do that even without your traditional concert performance. And I tell my students all the time, you hear choir directors talk about it all the time. Well, it's about the process. Shouldn't be as much about the end product. It should be about the process, right? And so sort of one of the things that I want to leave you with here today is, if it's all about the process, but you totally change what you are teaching when there is no concert, then is it really all about the process? And again, without a concert, maybe that does free us up to teach some things that we wouldn't normally get to teach. Maybe catch some of those national standards that we wouldn't touch on as much as we normally would. But I am still thinking it's all about that process and using great choral literature to continue to teach musical concepts and bring a great experience to our singers. So that's sort of my perspective on this. Now, we will assume for today's purposes that you will be teaching in one of two scenarios. So either you're fully virtual, whether that's synchronous or asynchronous, or you're in some sort of hybrid model, meaning you've got a combination of virtual instruction and in-person instruction. Now, the bonus to this and to sort of my idea of the flipped rehearsal model is that when we do sort of get back to quote unquote normal, and I use air quotes with that, we get to full-time in-person teaching, you're going to be able to use a lot of these techniques, these strategies, these resources to continue to expand the variety of your teaching to your singers. So that's the great thing. Now, the assumption with today is that your students will have access to some sort of electronic device. Are there a lot of things you could do in this webinar that don't require a device? Yes. But I think a lot of the more in-depth resources and techniques and really sort of reaching our students on a deeper level, a lot of these will require a device of some sort. Now, I am an Apple person, but throughout this webinar, I've tried to include Apple and also PC/Android resources in this webinar. So if you're not an Apple person, you'll still be able to take some ideas away from this. Now, what we can't do teaching virtually, there are just some certain things that we can't do. And I just want to go over this a little bit because I had some comments, had some questions about, well, how do you rehearse without, how do you rehearse virtually with the lag? What do you do to get around that? And here's the truth, and I hate to say it, we cannot duplicate virtually the experience of singing with others at the same time in a choir. So there's nothing that we can do that's going to allow us to hear our singers and for our singers to hear each other at the same time virtually. The technology literally does not exist. So if you're here today kind of looking for that magic pill, I'm afraid, the magic beans from Jack and the Beanstalk, I'm afraid that's not what this is going to be. The technology does not exist. The lag is going to be unavoidable. Now, there are people that are working on that. There are currently some options for one-on-one instruction. And if that's something that interests you, I advise you to look up Ian Howell and his software, sort of his hardware/software. It's called SoundJack. And I've seen some videos that he has done where sort of a one-on-one, like a private lesson situation. And he's gotten it down to the point where the lag is almost, you can't even tell that there's any sort of lag between two people. Now, there are some limits. Again, it's one-to-one instruction. There's a lot of extra technology. The price tag obviously goes up on that, but there's a lot of people that are working on making that sort of more accessible and then also making it work for larger numbers of people together. But if you teach some private lessons, you're in that situation, that's something that you can look up, and definitely keep an eye out on him and on SoundJack for in the future. It's difficult to address specific ensemble skills such as vocal blend. I had some questions about how do you talk about blend? It's really hard to do that because they're unable to hear each other. Now, what I will talk about in individual lessons and talking about tone and talking about how we can produce a relaxed, healthy tone that not going to stick out in a vocal ensemble. Those are things where you can sort of get to that idea of blend a little bit. We may not have what we think of as concerts. That might be impossible. Whether it's just the logistics of it, or whether you just have someone in your environment that just says, nope, can't do it. So the whole situation is going to require us to be flexible. If the only acceptable option to you is to rehearse how you normally would, in person, unfortunately, you're going to have some disappointment there. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be exactly how you would want it to be. So that's the bad news. Now, here's the good news. Here's what we can do, and there's tons of opportunity here. Okay, so we can emphasize the individual development of our singers. I talk to my singers all the time. Individual outcomes versus ensemble outcome. Well, obviously there's an ensemble outcome, which is the large group performance. But talking about those individual outcomes and getting our singers to realize, well, if I can improve my individual skills, whether that's in sight reading or whether that's in vocal technique or whatever it might be, that in turn is going to have a direct line to that ensemble outcome. And, ask every one of your singer, well, do you want to help the ensemble get better? Well, of course, they're always going to say yes. Well, how we can do that right now is focusing on your individual skills. And sometimes singers don't like that. Sometimes students don't like that. It's when I would just want to come and sing. But getting them to really think about that as thinking about that individual development, how that's going to have greater effects on the ensemble as a whole. Continuing to teach musical concepts through choral repertoire, as we did before. Continue to teach sight reading, music literacy, music history. Continuing to make connections through music. Continuing to help our singers develop vocal technique, as I mentioned. Continuing to incorporate the social aspects of being a choir member. Now, this is more difficult, but we still can do this in a virtual environment. Creating projects that incorporate the musical performances of our singers. We'll get to some alternative projects or alternative performances, covering some of the national standards that we don't normally get to, and continuing to keep our singers singing. That's the big one. Okay, so I'm going to quickly stop my screen share. I'm going to see if there's any questions here. Okay, so we've got a few things on there. All right. Oh, thank you for putting those comments, the flipped cheat sheet and the flipped assessments in those comments. That's extremely helpful. Thank you. So I'm going through. Oh, someone said they don't think you need the StreamYard for comments on YouTube. Great. That might just be for the Facebook. Okay. And then I see that last question. Will we be able to watch this after this is over? Yes. I'm going to send a follow-up email to all of you, and it will have the replay links in there. Okay. Which also gives you an opportunity to ask some more questions if you think of it as you're going through all of these. Okay. I see one question. What about some advanced singers who take lessons from someone besides you? How do we motivate them? I'm going to have an answer for that here just a little bit, Susan, as far as things that you can do to motivate those advanced singers. That's a great question. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go back now to my presentation. Okay. So what can we do? Okay, we covered all of that. So let's talk about this idea of the flipped rehearsal model. Okay, now you're probably familiar with the term flipped classroom, or maybe not. In a typical classroom, here's sort of what the flipped classroom looks like. So in class, this is what the typical classroom looks like. In class, you've got instruction involving new material and concepts. And then at home is when the students complete their homework over the material presented in class, right? That's our traditional setup. Now, a typical choral rehearsal is in class, we are rehearsing involving new musical material and topics and concepts. And then at home, students are then reviewing the music that they go over in class. And then there's also completing some homework presented in rehearsal, if you're giving students any sort of homework there. Now, to go back here a little bit, the typical classroom. So a flipped typical classroom, I'm thinking about the math people at my previous school, where what they would do is they would flip this. And so then in class was when sort of the learning activities and the examples would happen, and they would produce videos of new content, and then the students would then watch those at home. So they were actually getting the new instruction at home, and then when they came to class, they were expected to have been, already have been through that material. And that's when they're doing some sort of learning activity based on that instruction. So that's why they call it flipped, is that you're just kind of flipping what you're doing where. Okay. So now back to our typical choral rehearsal. So here is what then my idea of the flipped choral rehearsal is going to look like. Instead of the teaching of the new material in class, we're going to have to be thinking about teaching of new musical material at home, teaching new topics, and then also singing of our vocal parts, right? And again, if this is hybrid, then in class is when you can review that material and those topics that are taught virtually. You've got sort of group activities and any written assessments where you can reinforce that material. Now that way, if you're in a situation, I've had many teachers said, I'm not allowed to have singing this fall. Well, then now you can do singing virtually, and then in classes, then when you're reviewing material and doing some other things to sort of incorporate into the learning of that repertoire that you're teaching virtually at home. That is sort of the idea of this. And if you're all virtual, like I am going back in the fall, then there are all of these things that you can sort of pick and choose to teach virtual. So that is sort of the model here. Okay, so the teaching of the new material is going to be at home, and then if we do have them in class in a hybrid, that is where you're reinforcing that, and then touching on some other topics as well. Okay. So now this model is going to fit a variety of environments, just kind of what I talked about a little bit. Virtually, there's lots of ideas in this to add variety to your teaching. And you're also giving you some ideas to keep your singers singing, even if it is virtually, even if it is different than what we're normally used to, there are still ways that you can keep them singing. And to me, that is the most important thing. For the hybrid environment, the ideas of the flipped rehearsal work really well, even if you do have singing in person with masks. So maybe you're going to decide, well, I'm not going to sing for the whole 45 minutes. We're going to do 20 minutes of singing, and then the rest of the time we'll do other activities. You can still use these concepts and being able to virtually sort of singing through some parts and reinforcing what you're teaching in that rehearsal. Okay. Now, if you are in a hybrid situation where in person there's no singing, this is going to be perfect for you. Okay, this is going to be right up your alley. Now, if you're in person and you're in sort of a normal, everything is going back to normal, okay, which we all hope to be at sooner or later, sooner, hopefully, rather than later, right? Shift the focus more towards individual outcomes versus ensemble. So, I mentioned I was for 7 years one-to-one with iPads. I would use a lot of these techniques, a lot of these strategies to be able to have my students do assessments outside of the normal rehearsal meeting time. We weren't using our iPads a whole lot during class, but boy, those iPads were certainly put to use outside of the rehearsal. That is where they were really using those to do these different types of assessments, which gives them feedback, but also gives me feedback too. And it was really helpful because I could use that feedback and then use that to plan future rehearsals. And again, more opportunities for assessment, so you're not having to do all of your assessment during your rehearsal time. And again, gives you that great, more accurate, more individual feedback. Okay. So how does this flipped model work? That was one of the biggest questions I had. Well, how are you singing virtually? So here's sort of an idea of what I did this past spring and what I will do continuing in the fall. So teaching vocal parts via Zoom or Google Meet. My school used Zoom. Google Meet, I think, works just as well. So it's really just about what you're used to. Okay. So when you're doing this, each singer is going to be muted. right? There's no way for us to be able to hear them. It's just because of that latency, that lag. It just does not work. So you're not going to be able to hear them, and they're not going to be able to hear each other. However, they can hear you. So that means, you can, if you're able to record from a piano, or, I had a portable keyboard that I just put on my desk right in front of my laptop. And so playing a part as we're going on. So they can hear you. And that does give them some confidence, some sort of, reassurance as they are trying to sing their vocal part. Now, to save time, you could do this via sectionals. So like for my classes where I was meeting twice a week, once one of those meetings was everybody at the same time. And then one of those meetings was I broke up that 45 minutes into 10-minute sectionals. And so, first 10 minutes was sopranos, next 10 minutes was altos. So you could really isolate those individual parts. And to get your students a little bit more engaged, had that question about students, the more advanced students, how do you keep them engaged? Let them lead. It doesn't have to be you all the time. It doesn't have to be you with all of them on mute. It could be, okay, maybe you're not muted, you're still listening in, but you allow one of your singers to unmute. They sing the part, and then everybody on their own end tries to sing along with them. Okay, that's a great way to get some of your big leaders involved. Now, there is an option for breakout rooms. Now, here's sort of the bad news. Google Meet, it's not sort of a native function. There is a workaround using Google Slides, but it just takes a couple extra steps. And then Zoom breakout rooms work pretty well, but if your student is on a Chromebook, it's not going to work. Okay. One thing that you can do, and I did a little bit of this, is outside of your meeting time, have your singers partner up. And, they all have phones, or at least most of them have phones. So they call each other, they FaceTime each other and say, okay, you sing these 8 measures. And then the other one listens and gives them feedback. And then the other person sings, and that other person listens and gives them feedback. Okay. That's something that you can assign outside of your meeting time. Another thing that you can use to keep them engaged is to have every singer sing every part, obviously in their own octave, right? You'll always have that bass that wants to sing the alto part up the octave because they can do it. Why not? You're not going to hear them, right? It's virtual, so just let them do it. But that will keep them engaged. To assist singers outside of class meetings, there are a variety of ways that you can create practice tracks, and we'll talk about a few of these. But Google Drive, Screencastify, now those are limited to 5 minutes long, so just be aware of that. Flipgrid is another great way. We'll talk about that. Those are limited to 10 minutes. If you've got an iPhone, the Voice Memos app works great. I'm sure for Android, there's other voice recording apps that will work just as well. So you don't have to have all sorts of fancy equipment. And just basic stuff really will help as far as practice tracks go. You can get more complicated, which we'll talk about a few of those ideas as well. So now the next step would be creating multi-part recordings for singers to listen to in your virtual meetings, and also to use for practice and also completing assessments. So a couple of different things that you can do for this. Audacity and GarageBand are great options for this. Now, Audacity works for both Mac and PC. So if you're a PC person and you're not familiar with Audacity, this is something that you need to look at. It is free. You just download it. It's very easy to use. Very similar to GarageBand. I think GarageBand has some extra bells and whistles with it, but very similar software. So, something that we did with the repertoire, I would go into, I use GarageBand because I'm on my Mac, and I would record the alto part. And so then I would go then back and listening to that, and then I would record the tenor part, and then I would record the bass part. Now you can sing the parts, you can play the parts on a piano. Like for me, I actually trained as a countertenor, so I can sing the alto stuff, I can do the tenor stuff, baritone, fine. Bass notes, no. Don't. You can't does not work. Soprano, sometimes yes, sometimes no. So what I did was I sang the alto, the tenor, and the baritone, and I created those. And then I went back in and I recorded the bass part on the piano, and I recorded the soprano part on the piano. And then the great thing about both of those is that you can go in and play with the volume levels. So if you want to boost the soprano 2 part, you want to boost the alto part, you can do that. You can also create multi-part recording / practice tracks with some web-based solutions such as BandLab or Soundtrap. If you're unfamiliar with those, again, they're both web-based. They're very similar to each other. I've done a couple projects as a singer on Soundtrap. Works pretty well. There's lots of bells and whistles to it, almost too many bells and whistles. BandLab is very similar. I'm just getting sort of started and in a project that's going to be starting here in the next week or so that's using BandLab. The big difference there is BandLab is free. Soundtrap, if you want all of your students to have those accounts, which they need an account to use, it's something like for 50 students, it's $250. And so as it, if you have more students, like it goes up to 200, the price doesn't really scale down. Like for 200, it's $1,000 a year. And so they had a free trial this past spring, but that seems to have gone away. So if you're interested in something like that, BandLab is what I suggest. We'll talk a little bit about that here in just a bit. You can also use section leaders to provide a recording for each section. So talking about those advanced singers, give them a video where you just conduct the piece, or you give them, a MIDI recording. If you've got an accompanist, have them record the parts and give that to those singers, and then have them record their part. That's something that requires a lot of, some individual work and responsibility and investment. And then you can take those and just put those together with either Audacity, GarageBand, or even incorporate those into the BandLab Soundtrap model. And as I mentioned, tracks can be singing, they can be played by piano. The main idea is to give the singer the experience of singing while hearing all of the other parts. So if you put this multi-part recording together and say you have that on your laptop, and you play it and conduct along with it so that your singers can hear this via Zoom, that will work. Yes, there is some lag involved, but there shouldn't be too much lag as far as the audio that they're hearing from your laptop and the visual of you conducting. And again, you're not going to hear any of those issues because they're still muted. It just gives them the experience of having all those parts in their ear as they sing. And then obviously once you have that multi-part recording, you export it as an MP3 and you share that with them. And then they're able to use that for their practice purposes and also for recording some assessments. Okay, as I have there at the end. Singers can then record themselves singing as a form of assessment. Okay. So I'm going to hop out of my presentation here for just 1 second. We're going to see if we've got any questions here. I'm back and forth between children's needs. I hear that. We're doing this at 2:00, so I can try and get this done while my kids nap. So I totally understand that. What grade levels are you targeting today for this presentation? Again, I teach high school. I think a lot of these things will work at the middle school level. Elementary, there are some things that you can certainly use. I think that's tough because, they do have to have a little bit more, individual responsibility, and that can be tough for elementary kids. But we do have lots of resources on the website, and many of those are geared towards elementary through high school through college. So certainly there are some things there to check that out. Yep. And so perfect. Yep. I teach high school. Awesome. Yeah. You teaching and use many of these methods with middle school. And one thing, and I'll go back to my presentation, one thing to mention about Soundtrap and also BandLab is, oh, sorry, I've got to open this back up, is both of those have some pre-recorded sort of beats, I guess I would call it. And so, if you've got a music tech class, if you've got some sort of like a composition class, I think something that would really work at this middle school level. So give me 1 second here. All right. So I've got back to here. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. All right. So coming back here and now coming back to the share screen. All right. There we go. All right. That's what I wanted. Okay, so virtual instruction, other topics. So what are some things outside of singing that you could do virtually? Okay, and these are also some things that you could do in a hybrid model as well. It would just look a little bit different. So music theory, musictheory.net, if you haven't check this out. This is a website that provides online lessons. It also gives you the ability to create assessments. And I think if you're someone that has an LMS like Canvas, I believe it will link directly with your LMS as far as submitting some of these assessments. You can also then create video tutorials via Flipgrid or Screencastify of these lessons. So the lessons on this website are sort of PowerPoint presentations. And so then you can record yourself going through those, and then that can be the video presentation for your singers, for your students, so that they can then take those and use those to do the assessments. So things like key signatures, major minor scales, note identification, interval identification, all sorts of things on there. There's even sort of a virtual keyboard. So if someone needs, I don't have a keyboard or a piano at home, how do I play a note? That's another feature on there. Talking about vocal technique, you could do some mini lessons with vocal technique, again, via Flipgrid or Screencastify, and then have students record themselves demonstrating different concepts. Now, off the top of my head, I'm thinking the idea of chiaroscuro, where a sound that is too bright, a sound that is too dark, and then a sound that has a good balance of light and dark, sort of space and resonance, the chiaroscuro. Well, have your singers sing a couple phrases of My Country 'Tis of Thee. One example is sing it too chiaro. Now, another example is, okay, sing it too oscuro, too dark. And then the third example is demonstrate their understanding of a good balance of that concept. So lots of different things that you could do with vocal technique. If you're not as comfortable teaching vocal technique, two resources I would highly suggest to you are books by Catherine Rundis. I think I've unfortunately mistyped her name there. Rundis, I believe. But those are things that you can find on J.W. Pepper. Either way, the books are called Cantabile and Choral Cantabile. And Choral Cantabile is broken up into like 10-minute lessons that are geared towards using them in a choral rehearsal. So great resources if you want to brush up on your vocal technique. Solo repertoire, picking a selection of solo repertoire for each student to learn and then working with them one-to-one via Zoom or Google Meet. And it's essentially a private voice lesson if you have that opportunity. I know some do, some don't. If you do, I think that's a great opportunity. And many of the vocal collections out there have accompaniment tracks. This could be as easy as tenors. You are all gonna learn Come Again, Sweet Love. Sopranos, you are all going to learn Caro Mio Ben. Each section, you could do it that way. And if you cover one piece for each section, you have a solo and ensemble contest later on in the year. Maybe we actually get to have it in person. Then those students, everybody's already got solos worked up for that solo and ensemble contest. So lots of different options with solo repertoire. Sight reading. Again, creating video lessons via Flipgrid or Screencastify, and then have students record themselves singing those melodic examples. Sight Reading Factory is a great tool. Even if you don't have the budget to provide all of your singers with Sight Reading Factory, you could have just a teacher account, which I believe is $34.99 for a year. And all you have to do is go through and you create a sight singing example, take a screenshot of it. You take a JPEG. And so then you've got that right in you can put that right into your Flipgrid or your Screencastify presentation. You can even upload that, into your LMS, into an assignment. Here is your example. And and then they go and they record what they're doing. So you don't have to have accounts for all of your students. It's helpful. There are some extra assessment tools in there if you do that, but if you don't, that's totally okay. It's still a great tool, and really pretty inexpensive, for just doing a teacher account. If teaching virtually is your only option, which I know I am in this boat, at least for the first month, many of you are as well. Different things you can do. And I'm going to go through each one of these here a little bit. So listening analysis, solfege, takadimi analysis, or if you use a different rhythm system, a different sight singing system, whatever that is, doing composer profiles, a concert programming project, musical scavenger hunt, a composition project, and then also what I call a poetry perusal. Okay, so I'm going to go through each one of those. You can do those virtually, or they can also be done via a hybrid model, okay, which is what we're going to talk about right now. So what can we do in person, even if you're not singing? A lot. There's a lot of things that you can do, along with teaching, your typical choral repertoire, whatever you would normally do. So listening analysis, listening to a performance recording and having singers describing what they hear. It's a great way for them to just gain a greater understanding of music vocabulary, as well as some analysis skills. Having them compare and then contrast with other pieces of choral music. If you have 3 pieces of repertoire that you're working on, okay, have them listen to each one, and then they can talk about each one. And then that end question is, well, compare and contrast these 3 pieces. How are they similar? How are they different? And it doesn't have to be pieces that you're working on. We regularly in our typical rehearsals all play just quote unquote random recording of a choral piece, and we'll listen to it, and they'll write down comments, and then we'll have a group discussion. Still something that you can do whether virtually or hybrid. A solfege takadimi analysis, having singers analyzing their vocal part using solfege and takadimi. Give them a piece of music, have them analyze with solfege syllables, getting them in the habit of going through the process of using solfege and takadimi, so that they can be independent musicians. It's one of the big goals in my teaching, is creating independent musicians to the point where my singers get tired of hearing it, right? Teaching them that process. So then, kind of sad, but we want it to be where they don't need us anymore. So they can take a piece of music, they can automatically know, boom, here's my process. Here's the key signature. Here, I can find do. I can go through and analyze the solfege, and then I go about singing on my part. And same thing with takadimi, going through and getting those challenging rhythms on my own using those takadimi syllables. This is great, where then you can use this analysis to have them perform musical excerpts, another great opportunity for assessment. Composer profiles. And I use scavenger hunt down at the bottom of the page, but this can also be a bit of a scavenger hunt. Have singers do a search, a hunt for all information about the composer of a piece. And then after a set amount of time, you can stop and gather these ideas and have singers create a biography of the composer. So you can do this hybrid. You could even do this virtually. There's all sorts of online bulletin board programs and apps like Padlet, where they find an idea and they tack it to the bulletin board. And then when you're done, your whole class, every single singer has this huge collection of ideas and facts and little nuggets about these composers that they're singing their music. A concert programming project. This has been a popular one. And yes, I do have a handout in that PDF specifically to this one. Creating video lessons describing the programming process. How many times have you gotten the question, Mr. Walker, why did you select this piece? Mr. Walker, why are we not doing this? Why are we doing that? All the time, if you're me anyway. And so teaching them about that process. And so, you can do that via video lessons. You could do that in a hybrid model. And then include some sort of programming parameters. You have to give them some parameters and even maybe some example concert programs, but then having them create their own concert program and just using some publishing websites like JW Pepper, YouTube. There's plenty of online resources where they can make those selections. And then you can have the discussion about music difficulty and all of that. Like this, that's not just like a one-day thing. That's a number of days, and you can really go in depth and really teach about a lot of different topics just in that one project. The musical scavenger hunt. What I'm talking about here is score markings. And so singers search through their music, marking their score as they identify phrases, dynamic changes, articulation, all of these different things. And so you're probably giving them a presentation, a video lesson of here is how you mark your score. Here's a tutorial. Here is why we do it, right? You're having that discussion, and then boom, you're giving them the opportunity. And again, it doesn't have to be your current repertoire. You can just give them another piece of music. Okay, what can you find? And then having that discussion. Why are these things here? What effect do they have? All sorts of great discussions you can have. And they learn how to mark their score. Oh my goodness gracious sakes. Composition project. Here's another one where you could stretch this out over the course of a year if you wanted to. Now, at the basic level, give them some basic parameters, time signature, types of notes, and have them compose even a 4-bar melody. It doesn't have to be 8 bars, a 4-bar melody. Have them start off, start easy. These can be presented to the group then as sight reading examples. You can also incorporate some basic music theory. So if you want to start to talk to them about chord construction, chords and how they function, adding in some harmony, right? Now you can do this on regular old staff paper. You can do this online with MuseScore, which I'll talk about a little bit. There's lots of different ways that you can do this. Now that's building up to, here's sort of the higher level, getting to your advanced singers. Here's a project, group composition project via BandLab. Okay. And this is sort of all separate via notation. They're just getting on BandLab and someone makes a recording. Someone other than a soprano. Hey, let's give the melody to someone other than soprano. Altos, you get the melody. Alto, you make up an 8-bar melody. Ready, go. And they make that recording. And then the next person is, okay, basses. And maybe it's a 4-part collaborative project, right? Bass, you get to go in and you do a bass line to accompany this melody. And then, then the tenor will go in and do a harmony part. And then the soprano can go in. And this can be something where maybe your each group, your 4-person group, or maybe it's 8, maybe it's larger than that. Over the course of the year, they put together a composition. And if you're 4 quarters to the school year, well, your piece needs to have 4 sections. And so first quarter is you need to have your first section of your piece. Talk about composition and having those discussions and talking about form and just all sorts of things, phrasing. What a great project. Again, can be done hybrid, can be done collaboratively, outside of notation, which if you've got middle schoolers, that's probably easier for them to do via BandLab, or you can get into the notation part of it and get into like a free program like MuseScore. Okay. And then finally, poetry perusal. Doing a group discussion / analysis of the poetry of the piece. Having singers write about what images do the poetry create. Other great activities. This is where it could be like a choose your own adventure, right? You remember those books? I'm not dating myself, am I? Choose your own adventure? Okay, I hope not. Have singers write a short story, paint a picture, create a visual slideshow. So you could say all of these are options. You do what most interests you. Okay. But they have to depict sort of the meaning of the piece. And then they can use sort of the recording of the piece as the soundtrack, their background. I did this a number of years ago with Lordson's Ove las il bel viso, if you're familiar with that piece at all. Just very intense and very dramatic. And so I had them work in small groups, and they could do sort of a slideshow presentation like on Keynote, or they could sort of make up their own mini movie. And I gave them the flexibility. It could be animated. You could actually film, and had some parameters like, okay, you need to break up the jobs. But to this day, and this is again 7-8 years ago, I have students that did that project that I will see them or touch base online, like, remember when we did that project? That was awesome. And then we watched them all in class together, and it was just great. And the feeling, the emotion that they sang that piece with then when we performed it, it was so much more personal for them because they had gone through that creative process. So this could be as little or as big as you want it to be. Okay. Oh, and a couple more to touch on. Again, music theory, talking about musictheory.net. You can certainly do that in person in a hybrid model, getting into choral repertoire and even their solo literature and talking about basic music theory and chords and chord functions and all that sort of thing. And then music theory, you can even present a short lesson on the musical style of each time period, and then have students then go into Spotify or whatever audio app that they use and create a playlist for each musical time period. So it's just sort of a sneaky way of getting them to listen to music from all these different time periods, right? And so they get a better understanding of music style and of the musical period. So another great project. Okay. Couple more. Vocal technique. Again, you can do this in person. You just have to think about it a little bit different way. Presenting lessons devoted to the specific aspects, but instead of you singing and demonstrating, you're just going to pre-record yourself singing, demonstrating these different aspects and then playing those, whether they're audio or video, in the in-person instruction. So you're getting around, if you're in a situation where you cannot sing or you don't want to sing, you're getting around that, but you're just pre-recording those when you're on your own and you can safely do that. And then just using those audio or video recordings to reinforce the lessons that you're teaching. And then again, with solo literature, you can present examples of solo vocal literature. Listen to performance recordings. Discuss specific challenges that, as a singer, they might face if they had to both learn and then perform a piece, getting them into that performer's brain, right? Without having to actually do it, you're listening to it and you're getting them into that performer mindset. Okay. And then melodic dictation. starting with 2 or 4 bars of melodies on the piano, and students listen and they write down what they hear. Again, could be done digitally, could be done on staff paper. You didn't have to do it with notation. You could do it with solfege. Like, okay, I'm going to play 4 measures. The first note is do. And so then you play the melody on the piano, and judging by what they're hearing, can they sort of write that out in solfege if you're a solfege person, right? Or they can do it on notation too. Solfege might be an easier step, and then getting into the notation part. Okay. And then also rhythm exercises, getting some body percussion, right? And having singers echo rhythmic patterns. And so you do 2 measures or 4 measures. And so then they echo that back to you. And then once they have some experience, you can have them split up into pairs, and they can work in pairs where one person creates a pattern, the other person echoes it, then that person makes a pattern, and vice versa. And then the next step would be for singers to then use their takadimi syllables to write out the rhythm patterns. And then you could go one step further and do it with notation, with quarter notes and half notes. So it's sort of building that progression. All can be done in person without any sort of singing going on. Okay. Whew, that's a lot there. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a second and to kind of take a look at the comments here. Okay. So external microphone. I see that. So I am using, and I'm going to talk about this in the resources. Mine is the Audio-Technica ATR 2100. This runs for about $99. There's another one, the Blue Yeti microphone, which is a little bit more. You do not have to pay that much. Like, you can get a pretty decent microphone even for $20-30. So, you don't have to spend that much. But this one seems to be very consistent as far as the audio quality. And again, you can find that on Amazon and lots of other places. Okay. Oh my goodness, all of the comments here. So using Audacity, so you find the recorded sound is tinny. Yeah, I can get that. There are some functions in there where you can modify that sound a little bit. And so you can play around in there a little bit. But yes, I would agree with that. Can you ever have them all unmute and sing together? You can. It's not pretty. And there are some recordings out there. I've seen some on Facebook where people do that just to sort of, oh, can we do it? Can we do it, please? And then they try it. And it's just because if you've got 50 different people on that Zoom, it's people trying to sing the same thing at 50 different times. Yeah. So it doesn't work well, unfortunately. Maybe as a soprano, I could get my husband to sing the bass part. But, again, for those of you that talked about advanced singers, get those singers to sing those parts. Yeah. And again, that's something that has worked really well. Like, we were able to put together 3 pieces of repertoire in the spring just by working via Zoom. Do I give them a pre-post quiz? Oftentimes, yes. And we call that entrance slips and exit slips. And so a quick entrance slip as far as what do they expect coming into it, and then an exit slip, like what did they learn, what do they need to continue to work on, and how can I continue to help you? Like 3 quick questions. Shouldn't be any more than that. You want to keep it as simple as possible. Explaining the workaround with Google Meets and Google Slides. So I have not done this. My understanding is that you can put, so if you've got 6 different breakout rooms, you're going to put the links for those breakout rooms in a Google Slide presentation. And then when you're in your Google Meet, you will screen share those, and then they can copy and paste that, or it might even be a live link. I have not tried that. I'm a Zoom person. I have not tried that in Google Meet, but that is sort of the workaround. It's not a native thing, but it's fairly easy to do. It just takes a couple of extra steps. What is an LMS? An LMS is a learning management system. So like Canvas, Schoology, I think Google Classroom would be considered an LMS, something where essentially it's a home base, a hub where you can post assignments and things like that. If your school doesn't use anything like that, a very simple Google site might be something that would work for you. I know another music teacher, they do not like technology whatsoever. They didn't have any sort of hub that their school used. And in a day, they had created a Google site all by themselves and then had multiple lessons, video lessons posted on there via Screencastify. So it is fairly doable, even if you don't think that they are, if you consider yourself tech savvy. Yes, I will share I can share the slide presentation as well, if that's something that would be easier for you to take a look at. I think I can do that. I'll try. Love the musical scavenger hunt. Awesome. Talked about the USB mic. Copyright. We'll talk about copyright and some of the issues with that in just a second. Students can take pics of their own compositions and put it into Google Slides for their own page contribution. Absolutely. Going through there. I should teach college level educated. Oh, thank you so much. I actually have done some presentations with some local colleges, specifically on assessment ideas and things like that. Yeah, we'll talk about J.W. Pepper. That's a great thing. I'm going to talk about Flipgrid and Screencastify right now. And please share the slide presentation. Awesome. All right, I think I'm caught up. I'm going to go back to my presentation. I don't know why it keeps closing down on me for some reason when I leave it. So here it is. Nope. All right. So go back here. Yeah, we're going to talk about LMS right now. All right. And back to share screen. Awesome. Sorry, folks. I know I'm going over the 45 minutes. I apologize. I'll try and get through all the material as quickly as I can, but I don't want to leave anything out. So if you have to jet, I totally understand. But thanks so much for those of you that are hanging with me. Now, example, the Weep O' Mine Eyes. This is the PDF that I have shared with you of the flipped assessments. I just took a piece, Weep O' Mine Eyes, and I tailored all these different assessments, these handouts, to this piece. Okay. And I use this specifically because if you've got sort of a beginning SATB choir, this is very accessible. There's no divisie. The parts are very straightforward. And it's also a piece on the CPDL, which if you're not familiar with that, Choral Public Domain Library, you need to be familiar with that if you're not familiar with that, cpdl.org. So you can use that for free, duplicate it as needed. Okay. So I use that piece for that. So please, again, take those assessments, take those rubrics, use them, modify them, use them as you see fit. I want those to be usable documents. And if you're looking through those and you think, by the way, I think you should add this, or this would be really cool to add to this, or here's how I'm using that. Send me an email or hit me up on Facebook and let me know, because I want to add those things and continue to improve on these. Okay, but that's just the example. So hope you can find those useful and apply those to what you're doing. Now, here's sort of the nitty gritty, right? People want to know about resources. So I talked about LMS, Canvas, Google Classroom, Schoology is another one. Okay. So it's a way for students to submit assignments electronically. Now, if your school does not have this, that's okay. Google works great. Or if you're a Dropbox person, Dropbox works great too. I, use Google Drive. Our school never used Google Classroom, but I would use Google Drive. And we had Canvas as well. So just sharing up setting up a Google Drive folder where it's shared with each student. And they can even do that on their own. They can, if you have one shared folder, they share their individual folder, and then they share access with you and only you. So only you can see that. Other students can't see their work. And then anytime you've got an assignment, they're just dropping that assignment in that folder. Or even if they have school emails and they want to email it to you, that works. I personally don't like that because boy, it clutters up your inbox really quickly. But Google Drive folders work great. Google Sites works well as a hub, like I mentioned. If you just need a basic page where you can post things, where students can find it, where parents can find it, a basic Google site, you could just even do one page, and it's just sort of a scrolling thing. That works really well, and again, it's free. But if you have Canvas, that's a great LMS. There's lots of options, lots of different software that works with Canvas where you can submit assignments and it incorporates that right into the Canvas system. You can record directly into Canvas. So doing a video recording, doing audio recording. So it makes singing assessments really, really easy. Audio recordings. I talked about this a little bit, GarageBand, Audacity. And so then phone apps work really well. For Apple people out there, iPhone, the Voice Memos app. I have an app called iRecorder, which it's just a couple bucks. I forget, it's like $1.99. But I think the audio quality is a little bit better, and then it's got a few more options as far as sharing those recordings. And so I will often use that app for just doing some quick and easy practice tracks. I will even use that on my iPhone, in a rehearsal when we had in-person rehearsals, and just doing a recording of my choir singing rehearsal. And then I would email that to them as an MP3. And here's a quick analysis, 3 questions where they have to fill that out and submit it. Quick and easy assessment. Video lessons and recordings. So talking about the 2 big ones here are Flipgrid and Screencastify. I am actually in the near future going to be doing a sort of an online tutorial on Flipgrid. I am waiting just a little bit because they are rolling out some new features to Flipgrid. And I believe those come out August 5th. Some of them come out August 5th. They're going to be sort of rolling those out, one at a time. So I kind of want to wait till that comes out before I do that tutorial for all of you. If you're unfamiliar with Flipgrid, Flipgrid allows you to, you can produce a video, you can upload a video from somewhere else, you can do, this is new, a screencast inside of Flipgrid. Before you have to sort of do an app smash and Screencastify and Flipgrid together. Flipgrid has added a screencast. It could just be a prompt where, again, an exit slip, right, as a perfect example, where you ask them 3 questions. And so it just comes to them in a form of an assignment that they read. But I think the video portion of that is you can just so many different applications for that. And then students will go in, they will see they call them a topic. And it's basically an assignment. And so, or it can be a topic of discussion. And so then they will see your assignment, whether it's something they read or a video, and then they record or they do their response, right? This has some collaborative aspects to it where you can get some group work going and some collaboration, and then they can comment on each other's grids and things like that. I think for me, the greater use has been doing individual assessments where you can make those responses private. So other students don't necessarily see them, only you see them. And then once you they call it activate. Once you activate that video, then you can open up to where other students in that class can see it. But it's only students in that class, so you keep them separate. And it's free. So lots of great applications with that. So in the new future, seeing a tutorial. Screencastify, I talked about that a little bit, where you can do a screencast. It doesn't have to be a screencast. I've seen teachers where they had to, record an in-person lesson. They recorded it on their laptop, and so and then they uploaded that. Nice thing about Screencastify is it will upload directly into Google. And so if you have a Google Drive, you have a Google site, it will upload directly into that, which is really handy. The one sort of negative about Screencastify, as far as I know, your videos are limited to 5 minutes. Now you can always break it up into multiple videos. Here's part 1 of the lesson. Here's part 2. Here's part 3. But again, it's free. And a lot of these I've tried to find as many free resources as possible. But lots of great applications for that. And again, it's free. So if you want to do some screencasting, that'd be a great way to get started. iMovie, if you want to do anything with video, you're an Apple person looking for something free, iMovie is great. Even your camera app, if you've got an iPhone, and I'm sure Android has something similar, it works great. The cameras on these phones often are better than what you're seeing on a tablet or a laptop. And for an iPhone person, that camera app, it's so easy because you can share it to so many different places. So don't think it has to be fancy. It doesn't. And then also, Keynote and Google Slides for doing any sort of presentation. Again, I'm an Apple person. I'm a little partial to Keynote, but Google Slides, again, works great. Lots of different functions, and it will allow you to do some presentations with your students. So if you don't want to be on screen all the time, it allows you to do that. Audio editing, again, Audacity, GarageBand, and I just can't stress enough how easy these two pieces of software are. They really are quite simple and easy to use. If you want to go a little bit higher level, or you're in a place where, gosh, I wish we're all there. Your administrator comes to you and says, "Oh wow, we have all this money to spend." How would that be, right? Logic Pro X. As someone mentioned here the other day, it's the sort of the level up, the paid version of iMovie. Really is how I would describe it, but lots more bells, whistles, still very easy to use. And I put on there, if you look into this education bundle for both Logic Pro X, which is their audio, and then their video, which is Final Cut Pro. The bundle is $199. You're going to pay that much more if you're purchasing those individually. So I think I said iMovie. I meant GarageBand. It's sort of the paid Logic Pro X, the paid version of GarageBand. So, but really cool software. Video editing, then again, you've got the iMovie, free PC people. The thing that I see recommended all the time is DaVinci Resolve. Now there is a paid version of that, so you want to make sure. I think it's DaVinci Resolve Studio, but if you're looking for something free on the PC, that's where I would start. Again, you've got iMovie. Again, you've got the level up version of iMovie, the Final Cut Pro. Also, Adobe Premiere Elements. If you have access to any of the Adobe software, that is something that you should check out. $70. It's not too bad. If it's something where you're really going to use it a lot, then that might be worth your while. I actually use ScreenFlow, and that's just something that I decided to invest in. You can use that to do screencasting, but it's really great as a video editor. And so any sort of video projects, if you are taking on a virtual choir project, that is a great program to use. And it's not too bad, $129, a little pricey. But again, if it's something that you're going to be doing a lot of video work, a lot of video editing, maybe you can even get your school budget to pay for it. Assessment and collaboration. I talked a little bit about BandLab and Soundtrap. I mentioned I'm in a project right now using BandLab. So if I like it, that may be something that I do another online tutorial of. Again, I just like that it's free. It's not costing you hundreds, thousands of dollars for your students to use. Flipgrid, again, is another great assessment collaboration tool. Music First and Smart Music. I'll talk about this just briefly. Yeah, many of you may be familiar with Smart Music. Music First, a very similar product. I don't think it has sort of the vast music library that Smart Music does, although they're increasing that. But we did assessment. We tried assessment on iPads with Smart Music, like singing assessments, and it did not work very well. The accuracy was not very good. I would have students that would sing a sight singing example and sing it virtually perfectly, and they were getting 50 and 60%. So it just didn't seem to be accurate. Music First, the assessment portion of it, at least on iPads, was much more accurate. And I think they're a pretty similar price point. I think for a year, Music First, 75 students, I think was something like $650, something like that. Now, the great thing is that there are a lot of other different pieces of software that work inside Music First, and one of those is Sight Reading Factory. So, you can look at the price difference. It's not much more. If you wanted to do Sight Reading Factory, why not do Music First? And Music First, you have the ability to upload your own music in an XML file and assess your students on that. So take that public domain score, turn that into an XML file, upload that in, and then create assessments out of your current repertoire. That's a huge thing. And that type of thing saves you time because, it is assessing the singer itself, sort of that green light, red light assessment tool. Sight Reading Factory, you do have to go in and you have to listen to every single one. It doesn't do the assessment itself. So that is that part of it. And then again, collaboration, shared folders in Google Drive and Google Slides. It's very easy and it's free. And Google's kind of taken over the world. So there we go. Thinking about a podcast. What if you did a podcast with your class? And you had them pair up in two or even three people, and they got together and they did a 10-minute podcast episode over a particular topic. How cool would that be? And then, you have your own channel. And so it's uploaded onto the channel where everyone in that class can go through and listen to each other's podcasts. Buzzsprout is the sort of the hosting option that I would recommend initially. It does have a free option. I think it's 2 hours is the initial amount of audio that you can have on there. And then it also will keep those for up to 90 days and then it sort of recycles in there. But it is free. There's lots of different podcasting host companies, apps out there, but that's one that I would suggest. And again, for your audio, you're just using Audacity and GarageBand. You're not doing anything fancy. They could do interviews over Zoom, and you can record that, export that audio, and that goes right into Audacity or GarageBand, and then right into your podcasting host. So lots of different applications. Super cool. I talked about the USB microphones. The Blue Yeti is a popular one. There's lots of different models. I think when I was looking at them, the one model was $129. Again, the Audio Technica ATR 2100. It's what I use. You can find it readily for $99. You don't need to spend that much. If this is just something where you're thinking, I'm probably only going to use this for 6 months, you can get a perfectly good microphone for 20-30 bucks, and not have to spend, not have to break the bank. Different resources, getting into specific topics. So again, if you're looking at sight reading, the Sight Reading Factory, music theory is the musictheory.net, Zoom, Google Meet. Again, I mentioned that about the breakout rooms. One thing I didn't mention about, there is one difference as far as Zoom. Zoom is typically limited to 40 minutes. Now, they took that restriction away this past spring. Whether that will happen this fall, I don't know. So, that is something to watch out for, that the free version of that, typically you're limited to a 40-minute video. Google Meet then is 60 minutes. So a little bit different there. Other specific topics, Spotify. There's lots of choral playlists on Spotify. Again, that's something that you could use, getting into that music history project where students, are creating playlists of music from different time periods. YouTube, again, another great resource. Now, if you're worried about YouTube and sort of security with that and showing videos to students, there are some ways that you can do that a little bit more safely, so they're not seeing a lot of that extra stuff on the screen. With Google Slides, if you embed that link into a Google slide, that will get rid of a lot of that stuff. Or there's other things like SafeShare.tv or ViewPure.com, where those are very similar, where if you copy and paste the YouTube link into those pieces of software, then they will churn it out in sort of more of a safe format for you. So you don't, again, have anything inappropriate coming in on screen for you. Composition, I mentioned MuseScore. That is web-based. That is free. It's fairly self-intuitive, but they also have some good tutorials on there. Now, if you are an Apple person, specifically an iPad person, I would look at Notion, which is an iOS app. There is a desktop version of Notion, which is much more expensive. The Notion app is sort of pricey. I want to say it's like $15. But what I will do oftentimes is, if I've got music in an XML file, I will import that into Notion, and then I can export that as practice tracks. So that is something that is really quite cool. Notate Me, PhotoScore, or PlayScore. If you're interested in software that sort of scans a PDF and then turns that into an XML, those are things that you can look at. Fairly pricey. I will say that. Looking at software that you want to use to annotate a PDF. Notability is one. Adobe Acrobat Reader, PDF Expert. Those are all options. Notability is paid. I believe the other two are free. So those are things that you can look at. And then just like a pitch pipe or an online keyboard, again, it's like the kids always say, there's an app for that, right? There's lots of free ones that are out there. If kids don't have a piano at home, that's something that can help. So here's sort of the nitty gritty. If you wanted a list, here's what I would recommend as far as if you're getting started, and you're concerned with, is it free or not? So Zoom, Google Meet, You've got Flipgrid. You've got BandLab for some of that collaborative stuff. Something for collecting or editing audio, Audacity, GarageBand. Screencastify if you want something to help you at doing screencasts. Any sort of video editing, there are some good free options out there. And then, of course, presentations, the Keynote, the Google Slides, and then the others, the Site Refactoring, Music Theory, Music Score, and then the PDF annotators. Almost all of those are free. Okay, so hopefully be some good tools for you. All right, so Q&A. So really quick, I'm going to try and get back into the comments here for just 1 second. Is there a way to share your presentation with others? Yes. If you go to the Choir Director Corner page, you can share that outside to anyone. Inside the Facebook group, it is not shareable to anyone outside. But yes, you can share that to outside. Can confirm music first assessment technology. Yeah, blows smart music out of the water. And I really wanted to like smart music. I really did. It just didn't work. Soundtrap. Yes, you can do podcasts on it as well. Yeah, that's a very good point. Going through here. You can do together via Zoom or Google Meet, can sing together if you do some chord building. Yeah, absolutely. So someone is holding a note and then someone is layering on top of that where you don't have to worry about the time function. Yeah, absolutely. I used Flipgrid. It was easy to use and the students liked it. Post a topic every week. Yeah, great. Absolutely. Hopefully I answered the benefits of the Flipgrid and Screencastify. If not, go ahead and pop some more questions in there for me. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that J.W. Pepper deal in just a second. Talking a little bit about copyright. Does Audacity work in the Mac Catalina operating system? Yes, as far as I know. I'm on the, is that the most recent? If that's the most recent version, I can confirm that yes, it does work. They're really good about updating their software, which for a free software just blows my mind. Just thank goodness for the people at Audacity. Like I should send them a thank you note. You can embed them into Squalogy if you use that for the LMS. Yep. Do you have any experience with or thoughts on Noteflight and Fiat? No, I don't have experience with those. Noteflight I looked into. I believe that's a paid product. I've heard good things about people that have used Noteflight. So that might be something to check out if you get in a MuseScore and decide that you don't like it. But maybe someone could confirm that. I believe Noteflight is a paid product. Okay. Our district is going live Zoom chats while we have students in class. I always have the chat function in Zoom, and I guess if you're going to use Zoom, I'll talk about this really briefly, and we'll get to the Q&A. A couple of things you need to do is you need to make sure that there's a password that's used so that people can get in. And I would also use the waiting room function. That means that they are sort of in a virtual waiting room and you have to physically click them in order to let them into that Zoom meeting. I think there's also a function to disable the virtual backgrounds. Now, depending on your students, that might be a good thing, like freshman boys and Zoom and virtual backgrounds. Oh my goodness, that was interesting. But there are some students where that gives them a form of security. So maybe you have to say, okay, you can use a virtual background, but it has to be one of the default virtual backgrounds. You can't just upload everything into it. So yeah, I've been using Audacity for many years in both Apple and PC products. Yeah, and we have a PC laptop here at home. It works great. We have it here on my Apple stuff, and it looks great. Yeah. And I think I have those assessment links in the chat. I think I've got those in my presentation at the very end as well. If not, I'll add them in. Or I'll just scroll to that. I'll scroll to that page real quick. How about that? So, and they're both choirdirectorcorner.com/flipped cheat sheet. That is the sort of the planner or the document that takes you through all of this different content. I've tried to put as many of live links in there. So if you download that as a because it'll pop up in your web browser. So then if you download it and you're looking at it as a digital document, those links will be live. And so you can click right into it. And then the other one is flipped assessments, choirdirectorcorner.com/flipped assessments. And that is not, it doesn't have to be all capital letters. That's just to style my font, not case sensitive. Okay. And that'll also be on the document as well. Okay. All right. So I'm going to quick go all the way back to Q&A. Yeah, and I absolutely will share the slideshow. I'm sure I can. I can do that. Okay. All right. So going back to my screen share and getting into some Q&A. As I mentioned, I had over 250 questions, which is awesome. Some duplicates, but I wanted to take some of the most common ones here and just go through them here really quick, and then we'll get you out of here to enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you again for being here today. I really, really, really hope that you've found this helpful. I'm just really passionate about helping other choir directors, and so that's my big thing here. So number one, how to keep singers engaged virtually. I had this question a lot. So some different strategies for this. I always try to connect my group instruction with assessment, meaning whatever I am talking about via Zoom or via Google Meet, whatever it is virtually, I want to make sure my students know that there is going to be an assessment where that information is going to be critical, right? I always tell them flat out, I don't want to waste your time. I'm not going to, or at least try not to, go off tangents on things that aren't applicable to what we are doing. Everything that I talk about, my goal is to have it relate directly to assessment. So if students know that it's really directly related to their grades, essentially, that will help. Again, depends on your students and the age level that you teach. Incorporate individual interaction when possible in Zoom. Okay, so think about using proximity in rehearsal, where Johnny down at the end of the row, he keeps bugging the person next to him. And so in a typical rehearsal, the first thing that you would do is you would continue teaching whatever you're teaching, but you're going to walk and you're going to go and stand right next to him, right? So he knows that he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. Well, virtually, how this happens is, okay, we're singing through a section and we stop. I was just singing, the sopranos were singing, right? If we've got all of them in the room. Well, Bobby's in the bass section. He should have been paying attention. I stop. I say, Bobby, what did you really like about that? Right? And again, it's about maybe what the recording that you're playing was, right? Or what you were doing, right? Or maybe you had it where one of the sopranos was leading, was the one that was unmuted, right? That's sort of what I'm getting at here. One of the sopranos, Samantha, is the one that's unmuted and is singing, and the other sopranos are listening to her. Yeah, and you get done with the section. Bobby, what did you like about that? And if students know, just like in a regular rehearsal, that you could call on them at any time, and they have to unmute, and they have to give feedback that everybody else is going to hear, that can be really powerful. That really ups the attention level. And again, making time for student input if they know that that's a possibility, right? And so I try to make it a point to stop every few minutes, 3 or 4 times in a 45-minute meeting and stop and say, okay, who has questions? And so we unmute, and so then someone gets to ask a question. So, and if they know that you're going to do that, I think they're more willing to listen. If they know that they're just going to be muted for 45 minutes, they're going to start to zone out. So trying to find ways where you can have that back and forth interaction. Pacing, I think, is still incredibly important, just like it would be in person, maybe even more important, right? Because there's all sorts of shiny objects on that screen that are easy for them to get distracted. And doing mini breaks. And so, we're going to talk about community building activities here in just a second. 45 minutes. I get done with first 20 minutes. We're going to take a 5-minute break and we're going to do a community activity. And then after that, then we get right back into the rest of rehearsal, right? And, just to kind of add to this, so much of what we do, if you're virtual or halfway virtual in the fall, so much of what we do is going to just be interacting with kids. Like, first 2 weeks, the music stuff is just, it's going to be pushed to the side. It's going to be building that community and interacting with them and just getting them to the point that they know that somebody cares, right? As well as, if you haven't done any virtual work, getting them used to that technology, right? That's probably going to be the first 2 weeks, if not longer. Yeah. So giving them that chance to have input. And here are some of those community building fun activities. Now, these are just some of them, right? Take these and run with them, right? Having a scavenger hunt. So a literal scavenger hunt where you say, and again, they're on mute. It's like, okay, find me or bring me something that's red. And so then they literally, wherever they're at, have to go, and find something red and then bring it back to the screen and show it on the screen, right? Or finding something that's round. Yeah. You might not ever get them back, but bring me your pet, right? So you've got, 28 pets on screens, right? I'm sure they would love that. You might not ever get them back. So maybe don't do that. But doing a scavenger hunt, right? Quick 5-minute activity. Doing 20 questions, but doing it like a music version. I am thinking of a choral piece of music. You have 20 questions to try and figure out what it is, right? And you could maybe give them a few parameters depending on your age group. Like if they're middle school, it's like, okay, I'm going to, limit this to a choral music piece that we sang last year, right? But then they have to do 20 questions, try to figure out which piece you're working on, right? So many different applications for that. And who doesn't like 20 questions? I mean, come on. And you can change the number, 10 questions, right? Movie, TV, podcast, book recommendations, right? This spring, I had a homeroom, and it was just 10 of my choir kids, and we met once a week. And those kids, to a T, said to me, this was the highlight every single week, where they could just come on there and they could just interact with each other. And so I would have like a different theme each week. So I'd say, okay, come back next Tuesday when we meet, and it's going to be, I want your movie recommendations, right? And the next week it'd be, okay, give me your podcast recommendations or your music recommendations, right? And most of them think it's super cool that they get to share that with you, but then they get to share that with others as well. 2 Truths and a Lie composer version. Okay. The composer is Eric Whitaker. Eric Whitaker went to school at UNLV. Eric Whitaker, when he first composed the piece Sleep, he did it with a different text and had to change it because of copyright issues. Or Eric Whitaker shampoos his hair made out of yak's milk. I mean, you could just have so much fun with this, and using composers that maybe they've sung music of before or that they're working on currently. Boy, it'd be super fun. So 2 truths and a lie. And again, something fun, very short, boom, segue into the next part of your activity. Kahoot. Everything. A lot of people have heard of Kahoot, sort of an online sort of a clickers type game where it's a quiz, and if they have a device that they're able to click A, B, C, or D, like multiple choice, and then you can see how long it takes them and how many people get the correct answer, all of that. You can do that virtually. And I looked it up on their webpage, and they've got some tutorials how to do that virtually. So if you like, I can share that page, that link with you if that's something that you're interested in. Online bulletin boards, Padlet, one example. Lots of different applications for those. Virtual show and tell. So it could just be one person per meeting. It's like, okay, 5 minutes. Who's meeting next class period? Okay, who's going to do virtual show and tell? You can just have a schedule, or a virtual talent show, right? Everybody's on mute except that one person, and that person gets to share with everybody. It seems like, oh, that sounds like elementary school, right? High school kids love that stuff. They love that stuff, especially in today's world where they're craving that interaction. They're totally all about it. Doing a dream vacation, right? Say if you could go anywhere for a dream vacation, where would you go? Right? Sort of that desert island question, right? Pull those out and have, a little mini discussion as a break, right? Affirmations, shout outs. You can do this even as a Google form so that they're anonymous, right? And shout out to Christy, who helped me with my math homework last week. And so then you just read those. They're totally anonymous. The students don't see them as long as you don't share that spreadsheet with them. But we would do these in person every Friday or every other Friday if your block schedule, and you can do those virtually. And again, it's that connection that choir kids love so much. Alternatives to concerts. Okay, here's a few ideas for you. And again, virtual performances. I'll talk just briefly about the virtual choirs. I know many people are tired of that. I'll give you a couple resources for that. Okay, but try and think again outside of the box. Streaming performances. Now there are some copyright things with that, but instead, if you're worried about having an audience into your space, and you are able to have singing in person in your space or outside, recording them and then being able to stream that to parents, right? And again, there are some copyright things, we'll talk about that, but that's an alternative, right? It's not perfect. None of these things are perfect, but what can we do that's going to be the closest to what we normally do and keep our kids singing, right? A digital collaborative project like BandLab, and where you can take that and you can export that out as a presentation, or just playing it for each other in class. If you're doing small groups, 4 singers to a group, and you can play that for each others and share those as a presentation. Solo or small group performances. This is, for those of you that have to limit how many people you can meet with. If you have to do pods, right? Have each pod work on a couple different pieces of group literature, right? It's a lot more music for you to have to juggle, but boy, talk about the variety, that you're getting to teach. Or you can have still groups do the same piece. It's just that you're doing it in smaller ensembles, right? Or having solo performances, those solo pieces of literature that you're working on. If you can meet one-on-one with them and record that and then share those presentations with the other students, right? Different group projects and small group presentations. Here's a couple of ideas. Presentations on current choral repertoire. Compare and contrast. They could do this on Flipgrid. That podcasting idea, they could do this on a podcast, right? And they wouldn't necessarily have to put it anywhere out in the world. They could just do a recording, an audio recording together, and then you put those audio links on a Google site where the other students in the class can go in and listen to those. Again, this concert programming project, we're giving them all of the parameters, and they really have to do a lot of research depending on the parameters that you give them. And so I think that's a great project. Teaching a lot of different aspects of what we do just in that one project. And then, of course, the collaborative composition project I talked about, where alto sings the melody, bass person comes in and does the bass line, and lots of different. It's a composition project, but they're not necessarily having to go through the notation part of it. It's just all on that audio on that site. Now, what if you did that and just had them do a short sort of audio project, but then just said, probably for high schoolers, okay, now you have to notate this. Ooh, you'd see some heads exploding there. But boy, talk about higher level thinking skills and problem solving and all of that. It'd be a great project. Virtual choirs. Okay, I'm just going to say a couple of things. Number one, it does not have to be complicated. You see all these lovely things on social media, these lovely presentations, right? It doesn't have to be that flashy or that fancy, right? It's about putting a project together where the students can hear those voices coming together in some semblance of, small parts becoming this greater product, right? It's still not the same. I get it. But it's something, and it's cool in a different sort of way. Okay. I have a blog post that I did where I do sort of a step-by-step process using mostly free software. And that's choirdirectorcorner.com/virtual choir. That will take you to the blog post. And in that blog post, there's also a sort of a PDF cheat sheet that you can then download that gives you that step-by-step progression. Really quick, I did the audio in GarageBand. I used the audio for the recording from their different voices in GarageBand, and then I did a screenshot of them singing in Zoom. But I did not use that audio. I'm still using the audio from the GarageBand files that I put together. And then I put the two together using video software, where once you have the audio lined up, if you're conducting it via Zoom in the same sort of way, same tempos and phrases and things like that, then that video will line up, right? But the audio from the Zoom doesn't matter at all, because you're not using that. You're using the audio from Audacity or GarageBand. That's sort of the short version. But go to that blog post, and I think that'll become more clear, that process. Copyright. Had some questions about that. Okay. So if you are going to post, and I am not an expert on this, I am not a lawyer. I've tried to do a lot of self-education on this. And so again, take this with a grain of salt. But if you are going to post a virtual choir performance anywhere out in the world, out in the ether, you need to have a sync license. Okay. Now, here's the great news, is because of our current world situation, a lot of publishers are waiving those licenses, or they are dramatically reducing those fees. Okay. What I will tell you is, better safe than sorry. Check with the publisher. If you're going to post something, check with that publisher to see what they have done. Okay, whether they've waived it or whether it's a reduced fee. I have found Easy Song Licensing is a website that explains copyright requirements in sort of a very basic way, which I really needed. Like, there can be a lot of sort of legalese in that, and I didn't want that. Like, explain this to me like I'm 5. And so that is a website. If you have copyright questions, that's one place that's out there that I would recommend. Now, that is also a company where, they will do the licensing part of it for you. It's going to cost you a little bit more because, that's how they stay in business. But even if you just, like, I've had phone conversations with them and just calling them and asking them questions. If you've got questions about copyright, and they're more than happy to help. Distributing music, the JW Pepper, right? That came up in the comments. So if you go to jwpepper.com, that's their website. And on their homepage, over to the side, they have a big sort of logo. It's about sharing music. So JW Pepper has teamed with a huge amount of publishers. And so what they're saying is any music that you have purchased, I believe it says on the website last 4 years. I think someone said maybe last 5 years in the comments. So that might be something to look into. Anything that you have purchased in the past few years, they are partnering with these publishers to give you the rights to distribute that digitally. Okay. Or any new music that you purchase, distributing that digitally. Okay. And so I don't want to get into that too much, but I will say go to their webpage, click on that logo, and you can see all the different publishers that are there. And again, if you've got questions, calling them up or calling up those individual publishers, that's going to be your best bet. And I think your most accurate information. Okay. Helping singers that are self-conscious. I heard this a lot. Part of this is just sort of the atmosphere, I think, that you tried to create when we were in person, right? But letting them know right off the bat, it's okay to make mistakes. And I told them, I kind of joked with my singers. I said, look, y'all are on mute. If you sing and make a mistake, no one's going to know. Right. And again, I have high school students, so they laughed. I thought that was funny. It's like, well, if a mistake happens in the forest and no one's there to hear it, did it actually happen? So, they don't have to worry about that part of it. Now, I get where, like, the recording part can be sort of intimidating for some of them. Here's the suggestions that I would have. I would say, hey, here's the great thing. Frame it as a positive. If you're recording and you mess up, or you go back and listen to it and you just hate it, you can do it again. Like, you can't do that in a public performance, right? But you can do that digitally with this assessment. You don't like it, you can go back and do it again. And I would say, if you can, give them the opportunity to reassess. So even if they submit that and then you give them a grade and they go back and then they don't like the grade, then they can still do it again. Right? Or you can say, look, why don't you let me go through? It's not as bad as what you think. Why don't you let me go through and grade it? And then if you don't like your grade, then you always have the opportunity to go back and do it again. Okay. The other thing that I would suggest is sending a letter to the parents and asking them to literally and figuratively give their singers space. A lot of times the singers are self-conscious because there are other people that are home and they're nervous about people listening to them. Maybe it's not about doing the recording, it's about the people in their own house that are listening to them. And I was the same way when I was in school. My mom was a music teacher, and so I knew she was listening to me. And so, just had to say, Mom, give me my space. So I can't. It makes me nervous when you're sitting there listening. And so I know there's a lot of parents that are out there that they just want to hear their kids sing. But framing it for the parents, like, look, imagine you were trying to do your work at your job and you had someone that was standing over your shoulder the whole time. That would make you nervous. That would give you anxiety, right? So asking them, can you set aside a specific place that is at least somewhat private where the student can work specifically on any recordings that they're making, and say, look, I know you want to hear your kids. At the end of this project, I'm going to put all of these tracks together, and then you'll get to hear the final product. And maybe try and reason, depending on the age of your kid, reason with your students. Be like, look, your parents just want to hear you. They just want to hear what you're doing. They're not judging you, right? That it may not go over very well, but hindsight 2020. I know my mom. She just wanted to hear what I was doing, right? She wouldn't even come in and tell me how to do things, right? It was just she was just interested because she loves music. Many of your kids, they have those same types of parents. They just love music and they just want to hear what their kids are doing. But see if the parents can help with that, right? And let them understand that there needs to be somewhat of a boundary there to help those kids do that and do that confidently. How to get started with new students. You're going to be at a new school. Maybe, you're teaching 6 through 8 and you've got those new 6th graders come in. I'm actually starting at a new position this fall. What are the things that I'm going to do at the very beginning of the year? It's this old quote, and there's lots of different versions of it, right? I talked about this a little bit already. Students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Right. And so getting into the idea of community, getting into the idea of the logistics of technology. Even if you did virtual learning in the spring, there might be some things that you're doing differently in the fall. Getting them to a certain comfort level with that, where that doesn't give them anxiety, right? Talking with them about the rehearsal processes. Here's how the logistics of this Zoom rehearsal is going to work. Here is then how I want you to practice outside of rehearsal. Here's a process that works well, right? And giving them that step-by-step process that they can use as practicing musicians. I mean, we've been doing it for years, right? We understand how to practice. And oftentimes I forget they don't necessarily know the most efficient or productive way to practice. So having that discussion and going through the fundamentals, right? If you're using Solfege, spending some time, more time probably than you would, working with Solfege, working with Takadimi, how to do score markings, just all the skills that you need to be a productive choir member, right? You can still go through those and have those conversations. It might not look the same as being able to do it in person. Community building activities, right? Still, I talked about community, right? And it doesn't have to be a lot, just short little bursts. The end goal is having an eye on them being ready whenever, if and when we get to the point where we can be back together again, right? We want them to be as close as possible to being ready to hitting the ground running once that happens, right? I'm sure there's going to be an adjustment. There was an adjustment going from in-person to virtual. I'm sure it will be vice versa, when we get to that point. But, and even when we're in person and you start to use some of these techniques to, to expand the variety of assessment that you do, there's going to be an adjustment, and getting through the logistics of it will help reduce that anxiety a little bit. How to manage breakout rooms. Okay, we talked a little bit about breakout rooms and how they work. Having section leaders, those advanced singers, right? They can serve as section leaders, or I like to call them designated facilitators. Has a little bit more of an idea of servant leadership to it. If you've got a student that you feel like then section leader is going to be a little bit of a power trip, designated facilitator, right? more of an aura of servant leadership, that are tasked with leading that rehearsal. And by facilitator, just keeping it on track, right? Keeping it focused. Now, if you are in Zoom, if you are recording locally, you can manage participants to let that section leader record the breakout room. Okay, I'm not sure as far as breakout rooms with Google Meet. If anything else, they could, I suppose, sit there with their phone and record it and turn it back into you, right? I'm sure there's a way that you can do it. With Zoom, you have to be recording locally. If you're recording to the cloud, it will not work. Okay. So that is one way where you can actually have those recorded if you're recording locally. And so, letting the students know this is going to be recorded, that may sort of encourage them to be a little bit more on track. The other thing is, can you tie the participation to a form of assessment? Doing an exit slip. What are 3 things that you worked on in your sectional today? What are 3 things that you need to continue working on as an individual singer before the next rehearsal? Having something that they are required to do that's going to tie to that sectional. That can help as far as managing those breakout rooms. How do I choose repertoire at the appropriate difficulty level, right? This is hard normally, right? And so thinking about this, well, how does this translate then to virtual? Okay. My suggestion is to ease off the gas pedal a little bit when it comes to difficulty level, right? So I'm not going to maybe press the difficulty level as much as what I normally would as far as challenging my singers, right? The instruction time isn't the same. It's not the same, and you can't use it in a different way, and you can't give the immediate feedback like we normally can, right? It's just not the same. So, I programmed, Whitaker's Leonardo, a number of years ago. Now would not be the year to program that. Okay. So just think about easing off the gas pedal a little bit. My goal is to choose a music that is just challenging enough to keep them interested. I would normally say having music that's too difficult is not good. Having music that is too easy is not good. Here's the thing, though. In this case, having music that's too easy, it's not all that bad. Because if you sort of quote unquote finish whatever that project is related to that repertoire, you can just go on to new repertoire, right? Those projects aren't set in stone as far as a date like our normal concerts are. So there's no problem just moving on to something else, right? If you choose something that's too difficult, the kids are they're gonna shut down. Right. That's just same as in-person rehearsals. So my suggestion is, especially for those younger students, the younger ensembles, don't be afraid to do unison or 2-part repertoire and emphasize those fundamentals. You can emphasize those fundamentals not now, again, when we get back to finally being in person or without masks or not social distancing or whatever it is, you're going to have an easier transition, right? Now, if you're interested in finding some repertoire lists of accessible repertoire, that's always difficult, right? When you're looking for repertoire, is this going to be accessible for my students? I have some repertoire lists that are geared towards being at sort of an accessible difficulty level. This is part of my Choir Director Corner membership. And so if you're interested in something like that, these are going to be coming out soon. Going to choirdirectorcorner.com/tribe. That is the webpage for our membership group. And so those should be coming out in the next couple of weeks. I'll have 3, sort of an SATB, an SSA, and a TTB. There'll be listings of 50 recommended pieces of choral literature on each on each repertoire list. And I also then include a link to a video performance where I can find one. Okay, and those are all, I'll have like medium to advanced difficulty will be coming later, but these are all considered sort of accessible level of difficulty. So if that's something that you might be interested in, check out choirdirectorcorner.com/tribe. How do I keep my advanced singers engaged? I've touched on this in a number of ways throughout because there was a great question in the comments about that. When you're doing Zoom, instead of you singing and you're doing sectionals, let one of the singers, right, unmute. And you don't, as long as there's no background noise, you don't have to unmute so that, but letting them unmute and have them sing and have the other singers at that section sing along with them, right? Having them record vocal tracks for their section. You want to do practice tracks. You want to do sort of guide tracks for a virtual choir presentation or something along that. Have them take the responsibility, let them build their individual musicianship and have them create those tracks. Have an opt-in piece of higher difficulty that must be prepared outside of class meetings. So, if you've got a mixed choir and you want to say, okay, anyone that wants to work on this, we're going to work on this at such and such a time. It's outside of the normal meeting time, but here's the music and we're just going to work on this. And just so you know, the difficulty level is increased and it's going to require a lot more individual work on your part. But I will meet with you once a week to help you put it together. I think your advanced singers would go for it, right? Most of the advanced singers I know, any chance to do more repertoire, they just eat it up. So I think that's a great possibility if you have that at your disposal. Have them create content for social media or doing recruiting activities. If you're at the middle school level and creating recruiting material for those elementary kids, right? That's going to be even more important this time because our performances won't be quite as visible. They can't come and sit at one of your concerts. So have them work on that sort of material. Have them put it together and then they send it to you and then you're the one that puts that out, right? Especially social media. They put the content together, they send it to you. If you've got a choir Facebook page or choir Twitter, and you're the one that puts that out, right? Just so that you can make sure that everything is appropriate. Organizing virtual social activities, right? I had a group of choir kids that I know, they got together once a week on Zoom and they played board games. And they had to pick something where everybody had that board game, but different fun social activities, and again, the possibilities are just about endless. Any other ways to get them more involved, right? And giving them a greater level of responsibility, but also investment. Like if students know that they have the opportunity to give input, they have an opportunity to sort of guide the ship as far as where things are going, as far as instruction and projects and things like that, they're going to be more engaged. And that's for virtual, that's for in person, right? If they think it's just the choir director dictating things from the podium, they're going to zone out. Same type of deal. How do I manage my time and all of the online information? That's a big one, right? It's a big one. Keeping lessons, your video lessons that you create, your assessments, keeping them in small, digestible portions. For example, if you're going to do a singing assessment on a piece of literature that you're working on, don't have them record the piece all at once. Maybe that's the end product if that's part of a larger presentation. Have them record 8 measures. Have them record 4 measures, right? Break it up into small bits, like the exit slip. 3 questions, 1 or 2 sentences. That's it, right? You've got to remember, you've got to go through and grade all of these things, right? And if you are teaching virtually and you have kids, chances are you're not only teaching your students virtually, you're teaching your own kids virtually. Yes. Yes. So, don't go all gangbusters, right? This is not whoever creates the most work for themselves wins. That is not this. That's not ever this, but it's especially not this. So keep it small. Okay. Helps to have everything in one spot, not only for your students, but for us as teachers too, right? So if you've got Schoology or you've got Canvas, if not, trying to put something on a Google site or somewhere else where you can have everything in one place. It's helpful. Start slow, ease into it. Okay. As I said, the first 2 weeks, maybe longer, might not be a lot of music stuff. You're going to ease into this depending on how often you get to meet with them, right? Ease into it. If things go well, then you can start to slowly increase the student workload, because that's also going to mean in workload for you too, right? So slowly start to increase things. Okay. And then again, just like I said, remember the work-life balance. It's okay to not do hashtag all the things. Individual lessons versus small groups versus large group. Okay, last one, gang. Thanks for hanging in with me. Individual lessons and assessments, I think, can really be beneficial. And I think you can really make a lot of progress emphasizing individual progress in these models, right? Sometimes when the concert's right around the corner, we're not concerned as much with individual progress and outcomes. We're concerned with the ensemble outcome, right? And I get that. Here's your opportunity. You may not have that huge, big concert, public presentation, performance to necessarily in some of, I'm very sad about that. I'm sure many of you are sad about that too. But it can be an opportunity, right? Because if you don't have to necessarily emphasize that so much, you can start to emphasize a little bit more of that individual progress, right? It's the tipping of the seesaw, right? Seesaw, a lot of times concert is here and individual progress is here, right? And so can we balance out that seesaw a little bit more? Small groups are a great idea, especially if you are dealing with in-person learning and facilities are an issue. Like some states are going to pods, right? That's a great opportunity for small groups, right? Or facilities are an issue where your facilities are small and you're going to have to break kids up in order to space them out with social distancing. Do small groups. Absolutely. You could do different literature. You could do the same literature. How about, again, giving them input and investment? Here's 5 pieces of literature. We're going to go through all of them at the beginning. Each group, then, after we've gone through all 5, they get to pick one that they're working on, or 2, right? Giving them input, giving them investment, right? And, if you've got 10 small groups, and maybe you can narrow your focus a little bit too, right? Managing 10 different ensembles or pieces of music where it's totally different. Fun could be overwhelming. Pros, again, lots of variety, ability to spread out. Cons, more to manage, both logistically and musically. Large groups, they give our singers something closer to what they are used to and what we are used to. But again, it may not be possible logistically. But even if you're in a large group, there's a lot of different options, a lot of different opportunities, just what we've talked about as far as what you're teaching. Okay. Woo! All right. So now is the time, my friends. If you've got any other questions, you can pop them into the chat. You are also welcome to email me with your questions, and I'll go through all of that contact information here again, because I know we've been at this over 2 hours if you're still sticking with me. So you are free to keep those questions and then just email me. If we have enough questions still out there, what I might do is just gather all of those and go and in the next week I'll do another live session, whether maybe it's just on the Facebook page, do a Facebook Live where I just go through all the different questions. If that's something that you all would feel like would be helpful, I can do that, and then that will save us all time as well. Okay, so I'm going to stop my sharing here for just 1 second. Woofta! I know that's a lot of information, so I'm going to scroll back here a little bit and see if I can find any questions here. All right, so that I remember seeing that. Great info, love JW Pepper. So hopefully you got the 2 links. And again, I can send those out via email again. I'll also be listing those in the post here on Facebook, or if you're over there on YouTube watching, I can do that as well. I will share the presentation with you. Let's see. Okay. All right. Oh, and Easy Song licensing has been fantastic. Awesome. Awesome. Well, my friends, you are most welcome. Thank you. I see a couple friends that stayed with me through the whole thing. Terrific. Very good. Thank you so much. Really quick, here are the links that I'll share with you. So choirdirectorcornergroup.com. That is our private Facebook. And so this is on the Facebook page today. But if you're looking for a private Facebook group full of like-minded choir directors, there's lots of great interaction in there. That is where we are. And so you can do a search on Facebook, or you can go right straight to that link. If you enter that right into your web browser, it'll take you right to the group. There are 3 short questions that you have to answer in order to be admitted to the group. So make sure that you do answer those 3 questions. Otherwise, I don't think that you saw all of the information correctly, and so you won't be admitted to the group. Okay, so that is the private group. And then again, my email, matt@choirdirectorcorner.com. And then finally, the webpage, www.choirdirectorcorner.com. Well, thank you again for being here with me today. Leo thanks you. I thank you. I hope, again, like I said, that you can take some things from this session today and use them not only virtually this fall, but if and when we do get back to in person, you can do a lot of these things. Continue to use them virtually to have a wider variety of experiences for your students. So thank you so much. This is Matt Walker from the Choir Director Corner signing off. Have a great day.